Howdy, all of you delicious people. I'm here today to review Hawkeye Episode 4. The worst episode of this whole season, so isn't that great? Possibly this is such a waste of time show. Like, Disney, your quality is just freaking dipping. Just heavily dipping. To the point of us for this entire show is like 10 whole seconds of, oh wow, I guess this is the only reason why I'm here to watch this show, for 10 whole seconds of like, wow, what a reveal. What a relief it is. But other than that, this whole episode is just pointless. Which is great, right? To just... So, immediately, there were times in this episode where I went and I saw the 10-second skipping thing, and I immediately pressed it more than once. Just because there was a lot of stuff where I'm just like, get to the point. This is a waste. Why am I here? Even to where, like, the dialogue in this episode, I'm like, I'm sorry, like, when we get to the Hawkeye and Kazi, like, dialogue of things, I'm like, I have completely been so turned off by this episode to where when we actually get to the Hawkeye and Kazi dialogue, really I just want to have it be just like wow 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 wow, because really it's just Hawkeye is talking to Kazi and mentioning who he is and like how long he's been working with Lopez and like her father. And so I'm just like, what is the point of this dialogue? It goes nowhere. And so yeah, it's a whole lot of episode that kind of is to just be a massive waste that has 10 seconds of just like, man, I could have YouTube videoed this and I thought that my time would have been equally spent. Just seeing could I see the trailer? Could I see a sneak peek of this episode and then I won't have to watch this episode at all? The whole like coin flipping part of this episode, I'm like, I am skipping this. Like, there is no way you can get me to seriously watch this. Why would anybody want to watch this kind of stuff? I don't know. This show freaking sucks. Like, it's possibly like, I would complain like WandaVision like is a pointless show. But man, even like, this is bad, but it's possibly like maybe not as bad as WandaVision, but still like it's really like giving that thing a run for its money. Where it's like, man, I want to go back to WandaVision and really see if like there was something really there, because I feel like that like at some point like gave you something where this show is just like, we'll just keep giving them, like, we'll just keep them in the dark consistently, and then like the very last episode we'll just cliffhanger them and they'll just be like, what was the point of this episode? What was the point of this show? What was the point of this season? Just to gear up for a movie that's probably going to come out? Like, what is this? Like, what is this really, like, what is this a vehicle for us to gear up for in the future? Just another show of this? I don't really care. Like, this is not good enough. So, with that said, let's just go into spoilers about this one. Let's spoiler time. It's about that time again to spoil this episode. Really, like, the effort of which that I'm putting into this is equal to the effort of which that this show was to give me. So yeah. Plus, this is at my end of my day, and I'm just freaking tired. I'm just tired. So, very beginning of the episode, we leave off with Kate telling us that Kazi is working for Jack. I'm like, great. this is like, we could have probably figured that the tracksuit mafia is probably working for Jack. So in this episode, we go on and of course have Kate and Hawkeye going in to seemingly spring the trap on Jack, to all of a sudden have Jack have a sword to Hawkeye. And then all of a sudden, once Kate and Hawkeye are to be presented in this room, Jack's sword drops, and then they're like, "Oh well, hey, how about we all go and sit on this table and have a nice conversation about like what has been going on for the last 4 episodes." And then after that, Clint could give a rip and go off to talk to Lori and mention about some Rolodex watch with Lori, and then also that the Ronin suit isn't the only thing that had been left hanging uh, through Clint's missions and whatever, or Clint's past. Ooh. And also that Clint is kind of getting banged up, so he needs to go and ice his body and prop his legs up because he's running all over the place and he's getting tired of what? Doing nothing? Of doing jack crap nothing in this show. Whatever. So Kate is, of course, going on and talking to Eleanor and Jack, and they're talking about like copyrighted music and how Jack is being his own copyright, that he's trying to adjust certain songs and music so it doesn't sound like what it actually sounds like, so he can avoid I guess this show can avoid copyrights for whatever goofy reason, that it's trying to not have to say certain songs of the thing to avoid like the slimmest of copyrights. Wow, this was a show well worth it to watch here. So then we turn in, and then we push on to Clint going on and on about some trick arrows that he is to go and need to find that are to supposedly be located in the NYPD location. And because after Kate and Clint spend this whole night going through every single Christmas tradition, watching a number of Disney obviously sponsored Christmas films like Tim Allen's Santa Claus or any number of other Christmas movies that Disney is to have on their Disney Plus app conveniently. Whatever. So Kate comes home to a Hawkeye that is taping up all of his injuries, and so they go on and put ugly sweaters on and they decorate the tree because whatever the heck. We find out that Clint can flip quarters and nickels and dimes really well. Good for him. And so Kate then has to figure out how she can do this whole coin flipping thing just like Hawkeye can. So I skipped this so badly. And then we now have Hawkeye going on, and Kate is like, well, what is the best shot that you ever took? And Hawkeye is to mention this like, well, best shot that I ever took was the one that I didn't take. And then eventually he goes and re-references Natasha, but then we also have to show footage of other movies because these people are freaking lazy. And so they're taking their sweet Patukas time to showcase, oh, hey, you guys remember Infinity War and Endgame? Because now, since this thing is so popular on this Disney Plus, we're going to go and resell you Avengers Endgame and Infinity War. If you guys didn't see that movie or didn't see either one of these films, because you obviously did. It's conveniently on Disney. I just resaw Endgame recently, and uh, what a waste. So, Hawkeye is to also go on and talk about that his family had all, like, been blipped out, and how horrible that was, and how Clint went on and had to be the Ronin because of how horrific that all of that whole scene was. That this show. Then, because hey, like, we have nothing that, like, Renner or frickin' Hawkeye can boo hoo cry about even more. Can we get an action scene somewhere in this frickin' movie? Oh, wait. Like, we have to wait to the very end. Oh, I'm sorry. Like, like we just have dialogue being spewed out between Hawkeye and Kazi, and then eventually we get to an action sequence of people fighting at the end of this garbage. So let's move on with that. So Hawkeye is to go on and tell Kate, like, hey, you should go and hang out with those LARPer people, because those LARPer people will eventually give me back my trick arrows that I am to be missing. And because Kate is to mention, it's like, well, hey, like, how many trick arrows do you really have left? And Clint is to say, it's like, well, hey, if anything, I just have some trick arrowheads, but that's all I really have left. And she's like, wow, like, that's pretty scary. That you're eventually going to have to rely on, like, old-fashioned arrows to get business done, right? So, Hawkeye is to go on and have Kate, like, be with these LARPers. And so she's to find out that they're so cool, so much so that she's, like, exchanging, like, fashion tips with them, and, like, going through all of their clothes, and eventually going on and having Kate, like, tell these people, it's like, well, hey, like, if we give you guys enough fabric to do 2 costumes, and then we give you, like, a little bit more, like, fabric or whatever, whichever, to do 2 more costumes, like, well, hey, like, would you give me and Hawkeye, like, some costumes? Huh? And because Kate is mentioning that Hawkeye still needs to come up with his own unique costume just for this show. So Hawkeye eventually is to get this bag with this girl saying, like, hey, you can't take this bag with you. Like, it has bombshell on it. And Kate's like, well, hey, he'll just borrow it and he'll give it right back to you. Great. So now let's get to the mission. If we haven't killed off anybody, I'm gonna try to get to this through this as quickly as possible. So now Hawkeye and Kate are doing this stakeout to go and get to this one room that is to have a Rolex, but it also has Echo in it also. So that way we can actually get to an action sequence here. Because Hawkeye is to figure out some kind of arrow plan of how he can basically get into this one room in under 3 minutes. And so all of a sudden Kate is like, you know what, I'm just going to go and walk over there, just see some old man and help him with some groceries. And then I'm going to go and tell everybody in this elevator that it's just me and one guy that, hey, I'm talking to an Avenger, and then seem crazy, and then this guy will just scoot off. And then Kate is to mention how, like, her bow is so cumbersome, and how does Hawkeye deal with it? And he has a retractable bow. I'm like, oh my god, this is so exciting. And then Kate goes off and is to go through this apartment and is to go and find this Rolodex to eventually find Echo there, beating the crap out of her. And then all of a sudden, Hawkeye is on another rooftop, going and seemingly beating up a girl who he thought is Echo, but actually isn't. All of a sudden, Kate is to try to, like, hey man, like, I'm gonna need some help here. And so Hawkeye is to go and give, like, Kate the ability to do this whole zip line thing. And so Kate eventually goes and does this zip line thing and is to, of course, not be able to quite uh, get it all the way to where she needs to get to this rooftop. And so eventually what ends up happening is Hawkeye ends up cutting the zip line, and Echo and what is to be, of course, Belova is fighting it out, because eventually when Belova loses her gun, she starts fighting with her Black Widow tech, which eventually takes out Echo. And then eventually Hawkeye is to go on and uh, take down, of course, Belova when Hawkeye is to pretty much use her own tech against her, and so take her down. So we eventually have Kate, who ends up, of course, getting her line cut to go on to hit these Christmas lights, the zip line that she was on. Hawkeye cuts it so that way she goes and smacks into these lights. But then eventually Kate goes on and makes her way back to Hawkeye. And so Kate is to say, it's like, well, hey, like, you know what? This is kind of like a two-way street. Like, we're partners here. Like, why can't you trust me? And, like, we're partners. And Hawkeye's like, we're not partners. Like, if anything, like I'm just trying to keep you safe. And so we're not really partners. Like, this is kind of like 48 Hours, really. Where, like, they ain't partners, they ain't friends, they ain't whatever. Like, we just have Hawkeye that completely wants to keep this whole Ronin situation, like, zipped up tight. And that's why eventually he wants to go to talk to Kazi to see how far down that this whole thing is connected, so that way he can figure out how to completely seal all of this off, to be done with this whole thing. That's kind of what the Kazi situation was all about. So we then go on and have Clint, who's saying, like, well, this whole situation has changed because now Black Widow has been assigned to this whole thing. So there's something much higher here that we're not aware of. And so we're going to have to figure out in the next 2 episodes how to just deal with this. And I'm just like, and that's just how this thing just kind of like fizzles out. So I'm just like, whatever with this show. I'm going to get out of here. This show is just like, I'm going to, yeah. The shortest probably Hawkeye review, because this was a pointless episode. I apologize for how much non-detail I went about this, but hey guys, if you saw this episode, you would easily understand why I didn't go into detail. There's nothing about this that felt like that I needed to even do a review about this episode. There was nothing here besides Belova showing up, and that's it. I could have just said, hey, spoilers, Belova shows up, see you later, and that would have really been it. I don't know what the heck that whole Rolodex thing means. A lot of people keep saying that Kingpin is to supposedly be involved in this show. Like, I think that's stretching it. I think if anything, like we still have that whole supposed Dark Avenger thing going on with Valentine, the girl from Seinfeld who was in Falcon and Winter Soldier. I think we're getting, or yeah, like I think we're getting like a Dark Avengers kind of thing, where eventually we're gonna have like a like West Coast Avenger thing set up or something. Not quite sure yet, but we'll see how this all eventually plays out. So, without a doubt, I think I'm going to get out of here because, yeah, there isn't much of a setup, and there was not much of talking points in here because they basically just gave us a pointless episode. So, I'm going to get out of here. Goodbye, everybody. Goodbye, everybody.